Hi everyone, once again welcome to this lecture. We are actually the course is Linux programming and scripting. We have been talking about the Perl programming language, and today is Perl lecture 7. We have made a lot of progress with respect to Perl, and I hope you are now much more familiar with the inner workings of Perl and are confident to do programming in Perl. But mainly, we looked at several data structures so far, and we will continue our discussions still with the data structures in Perl. Then we will take upon the controls. While we are doing this itself, we are learning somewhat some of the controls, which is really good actually. So let's recap as to what we saw in the last class. In the last class we continued the discussions on array. We looked at some operations on array, for example the reverse, how to reverse the array, essentially like the order of the array using the reverse function. We also understood about the sort function to sort an array, and then we also did some chopping, use the chop function to chop the last character of every element in the array. Then we also looked at the data from the array context as well as the scalar context, and we noted the differences between how they are perceived, how they will be perceived if you are in the array context and what is the scalar context. We also studied how to avoid array reference for scalars, and we studied principally like the 3 methods as to how to define a scalar when we use like the array notation essentially. So a dollar variable followed by a square bracket is always an array that we know about, but then how to distinguish between a dollar and basically a scalar variable with just a square bracket. One method was we can define the variable name under this the brackets or the double brackets essentially, which is actually shown here. So this notation. The other one is the concatenation notation, where we can actually use a dot to actually concatenate variables essentially. So that distinguishes completely between a scalar variable and a square bracket. Or the third option is this one, where we can escape the square brackets using a backslash. I think this is pretty much what we talked about in the last lecture. With this, I think we are ready to move on. What I want to really touch upon today is the associative array, or the hash array. It's also known as the hash array, and we will learn about that today. Then we will also see some of the common challenges. The two main things in the Perl language, if you don't know anything that you should really know about, is one of them is the hash array and how to use the hash array, and then the second one is the regular expression. So we will see the regular expression in more detail in the coming classes. I always promise you that. So we are not yet complete with the Perl programming language, so we will be looking at that. But today we will talk about the associative array and the various things associated with that, the functions, and also how to use them. And we will also look at some simple application essentially how we can do it. and I will also give you some problems to work on to understand the concepts of the hash array. So without delaying further, let's look at what it is essentially. So a hash array, couple of things. One is it does not have a numerical index. It uses the general data, often strings, as indexes or indices. The index itself is referred to as key in a hash array, and then the corresponding element is its value. So these two terms are very important because we will be looking at this from these two terms. So I want you to remember this. A hash array or an associative array is always referred to, the indexes are referred to as key, and then the corresponding element in the array is referred to as value. So the hash table basically, like we use the hash table to implement an associative array. So hence these structures are known as hashes in Perl. Hash is not probably like new to you. Like essentially, hash is something which is unique in the sense that it has very random access capabilities built in, and essentially, that's what we are striving to achieve when using the associative array. So you don't have to do a linear search to get to a particular element. Instead, you can directly go into that particular element using the hash function. And so the other just resulting from that is that the elements in the Perl hash do not have any natural ordering. So there is no relationship between each of the keys or each of the indexes in the array, in the associative array, whereas in a regular array, as you know, the numerical values are incremented one at a time, starting from 0, things like that, basically, like where we don't implicitly specify so the index itself. So here there is no definite relationship between the order of the keys and either the values of the keys or the order in which they are entered into the hash. So we just enter values, and they can be attached anywhere within the array. I will show you some examples essentially as to how we add, how we delete objects from the hash array. Let's look at more things essentially. A couple of more syntax issues. One is the hash variables or the hash array. The names begin with this character, the percentage. If an array is assigned to a hash, the even index elements becomes the keys, and then the odd in index elements are the corresponding values. So assigning an odd length array to a hash will cause an error. So these are some of the basic things that you may want to look at. Meaning, like this is like by mistake, like you are instead of ampersand, you don't use that, and instead you use the percentage, and this is what will happen. And then the curly braces are used to subscript the hash. So if percentage h is an hash, then the element correspond to a 4. You can do it as $h and then the 4 essentially. So there's an example here. So here this is a percentage hash. Essentially, this has 3 elements. So this is what is this? This is the key, and this is the value. So again, another key is Bob, and that value is ZZZ, and then the percentage hash has a key of 50, and the value is John. So look at that, right? So the key can be just a character, string, or a numerical value. Same thing with values. Essentially, they can be just a number or string or any other data structures. Um, so like so this is the key thing. Basically we'll see like how we will use this and how we will insert into this one. So let's look at in a nutshell, essentially again it's an unordered list, unordered set of pairs of keys and values, and each key needs to be associated with a value, otherwise it's an error. So we mentioned that basically it always starts with a percentage. So here I'm declaring my percentage hash. This is again a declaration, essentially, like this is my term. In fact, Perl does not impose any kind of restriction. You can use variables as you please. You don't have to declare, but it's a good idea and a good practice and a good style to actually declare your variables upfront using the my notation. Again, unlike other programming languages, you don't have to specify whether it's an integer, whether it's a string, whether it's a character, those kind of variables. You can just simply say like my and then the particular variable name. So here the initialization, essentially like this is one way to initialize. So basically assign the key A to 5, the value 5, and then key Bob to value ZZZ, and then key 50 to value John. So far it's fairly easy, declaring the variable and then basically assigning it. Now how do we access it? So we can do like as I mentioned, like in the curly braces here. So within the curly braces we specify the key. So in order to access that particular value, so it is a print $50 that gives you John. And if you want to reset this hash table, essentially like you just remove all these things, all the key value pairs, and simply do this, and then that will reset that. So now let's look at how do we modify. What happens when we say hash Bob is AAA? So now what happens to this one? The value simply change. So from ZZZ it changes to AAA. Now if you want to add a new key value pair, we just simply specify hash and then that particular key with what the value is, and then it just gets added. So basically now the hash array becomes the number of elements become 4, and then the value that you mentioned is getting inserted. Please note that actually there is no order here. I'm inserting at the end. It can be anywhere in the middle or wherever it is. Basically it just gets added to this hash array. That's how you should look at it, because there is no order that is associated with it. So you cannot say like hash and then you get this one. Essentially like you need to access it using the key and then you get the value. So again there is no order in this assignment. The way that certain key, whether it exists, is to use this function called exists. So we can say like this actually like is actually doing two things. One is it exists. This essentially like it's actually finding whether there's a value that exists corresponding to this key, essentially, which is kind of testing whether there is a key that is existing in there. Now we can also do a delete, essentially like that is essentially just use the delete function, and then we specify the particular key value pair. The key value pair is denoted as just the array followed by the keys, essentially like so the key and the value both get deleted in this case. So for example here we say the 50 which is associated to 50 John. So once we execute this, both of them get deleted. So it's not just it's removing the 50 or it's removing just the John, it's removing both the key and the value from that array. So now so far we have learned the three different data types, essentially the variable types. Essentially one is the scalar. Scalar could be a number or a string. The array data type, which is essentially like a string of objects, essentially like, so the array has a value of 0, which is the first one, and then the last one is whatever the nth array. Whereas for a hash, essentially hash has just key value pair. So notice that actually like here the elements are all like joined together because this starts from 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4 etc. Whereas here there is no any order here, essentially only connection is this element is connected to this element is connected to this element is connected to this, that's all. So you can think of hash array as a two-dimensional arrays, which is how we can make use of it in real world applications. And then also like it's you can also call it as a sparse array. So this is again useful, say for example like you have a coordinate system where a point is denoted by x, y, and then you have given like say like 3 points. To identify these points you can actually build a hash array where you can say like percentage points, and then you can say like percentage points, and then the key can be just x, and that corresponds to, or say like this is x1 y1, this is x2 y2, and this is x3 y3. I can just simply note as x1 to y1, x2 to y2, x3 to y3. Now if I access like dollar points, x1, this will get me the y1. So now you can see that actually like I can preserve both x1 and y1, and the points that are relevant for me I can store it within the array. So this is one way to actually store like a two-dimensional array piece with the relevance, and then now I can do any kind of operations between them. I know the x1, I know y1, I can get to x1 from y1. There's an interesting problem that I will pose later on where I want you to get x1 given what is the y1. So for that I'll give you like more functions essentially. So let's look at some more functions to work with hash arrays. So here another practical example is essentially a phone book. We can associate various users with their phone numbers and put them in a hash array, and then when we say like phone book for a given user, it prints their numbers. This is pretty much what we saw, basically like how we change the hash array. The values can be assigned to a hash reference to insert a new key value relation or change the value related to the key. These two we saw already like as examples. A key value relation can be removed with the delete operator. This is something that we saw already, and then this is another way to delete all the contents of the hash array. We know that one other method is the percentage hash equal to just this will get rid of everything. The other operator is basically like under percentage hash. This also will just remove all the contents from the hash. And then the exist operator, this is something that we saw basically, like I mean, if there's any key is related to any value in the hash, and then if you just do this basically, like I mean, just check the $h something, it doesn't work since the related value can be empty string or 0, both of which is contained as the boolean false. So we don't want to just see like if this kind of a thing, $h something. If we specify this kind of a check, essentially, like I mean, if the something is actually has a 0, it will still termed as a boolean false. So I think there's a typo here. It should be boolean false. So this is what this means essentially. So don't do this. Instead, use the exist function to check whether it really exists or not. And exist function, if it is a 0, it still returns a true value, and only like it returns a false only if such object does not exist in the hash array. And then the hash variable embedded in a string is not interpolated. This is another key concept. However, a reference to the hash element is interpolated. So if you are embedding a variable inside a string, you cannot interpolate or hash variable that is embedded in a string cannot be interpolated. So just remember that when you are using hash. So now we want to iterate through the hash. Actually, there are two functions again to do this. The first one is the keys operator essentially. So this keys operator will iterate through all the keys. The other one we will learn a little bit later. Then also the sort operator is another one which can also be applied to iterate through the keys in order. So let's see like how we can use it. So in order to get the list of all the keys in the hash, we can simply put keys percentage hash, and this returns all the keys and we just store it into an array. Yeah. So the array is essentially like hash keys is A Bob 50. So this is hash keys 0, this is 1, this is 2. So you can actually like in fact print out these values and then be the same basically. So this is to get the keys. So the other one that I mentioned is using the values function. Again, the values actually captures all this side of the equation. So keys are all going into here, values are all going into here. So what does values look like? So so again it's the same thing basically. So as vals 0 is this one, and then this is 1 and this is 2. So here is a phone book example that we started actually. So yeah, we basically we are declaring this hash array called phone numbers. Initially we are initializing it to a null, and then we declare a variable called number, and here we are also like I mean have a name essentially, and then we basically query the name and the number. So we start this while loop here, starts here and ends here, and then basically if it is not equal to end is the mnemonic for ending the program or ending this loop. So if it is not equal to end, then what we say is basically like enter a name that will be added to the phone book. We ask this basically, and then we capture the standard in whatever we input into the name. We chomp the last character, which is the new line essentially, and then we compare the name against end. If they are equal, then we skip the whole thing and then go to the beginning of the loop. So it tests this condition, and since it is an end, it will end the loop itself. But if it is not, then we will go forward. Then we ask to enter the phone number, and then we capture the number in this number variable which we declared earlier. Again, we chomp the number, and then we basically just add that into the hash array that we declared, the phone numbers, with the key as the name and number as the value. So this is the one that we ask for a name and then the print the number corresponding to that name. So this program is after we build this hash array in this slide. So once we build the hash array, now what do we do? So here we again initialize the name. Again we ask whether the name is end. If it is not end, then we go into the program and we basically like ask to enter the name. The name we just get it from the standard in, and we again do the chomp operation to remove the last character, which is the new line here. So once we have the name, then we look for whether that exists in the in our phone numbers hash array. If it exists, then we just print out this line. So look here, basically this is the key, and here we use the same key to check what the value is. So this whole thing, this prints out the value. And then again, if the name is we type as end, at this point it just goes back to the beginning. But then if it is not end and if the name is not found, which is this exists returns a false value or a 0, then it goes all the way to this else condition, and then we just print out saying that the name is not found. Here you can do some more additional tricks, and basically maybe you can also say that, hey, if it is not found, do you want to add and then if the user says yes, then you again go into just updating the hash array, and I think like you can easily update the hash array by just using this numbers $name equal to $number. Okay, so if you add this, essentially like you can make this program a complete program where if you give a name, it looks into its dictionary, sees whether that name has a matching number, then it prints out the number, If it does not have the match, then it prompts you for entering a number so that it can add for that particular person or that particular name what the number is, corresponding number is. Okay. There are some additional concepts in the hash. Essentially, like one of them is this predefined hashes. So the percentage env variable is defined to be a key value pair defined in the environment of the running Perl process. These percentage env variables are inherited from the runtime environment. So again, in the Windows context, actually, like we can actually set up through the command line set command, essentially, like so when we do like set, then we can just say like actually this so we say set and then variable name equal to value. In so this is essentially like so this is the command line set or even like in the Unix bourne shell we can do the simple assignment similar to this. We can also do like set env and then set env and then the variable name is value. So the simple assignment will actually like set these things, and then once it is done, the percentage env has these key value association already. So then it uses that to determine how the operating system to behave. So now let me give you like a small quiz essentially. Try to define an hash array with the following data. Here actually it's very simple essentially. So it's basically like all of them are just strings, and this side is all numeric. It could be like mix and match also. And now you sort the array based on the keys. Try to sort the array based on the values, and then print both the results and see like what you get. We will discuss this in the next lecture as to what you should be seeing. So now we come to the next set of topics essentially. One is like how do we reference the what is the concept of a scalar variable, and what is how is it represented in the memory? As you know, like every variable is also has a reference to that variable. In C language we call it as an address, and then essentially like every variable you can think of it as a variable is a memory location in the main memory to which a value will be stored, and then there is an address to it which will actually is the reference to that variable. So even in Perl we can actually give references to the variables essentially. Essentially the reference is a scalar value given to the giving the address of another value in the memory. So whatever the address of this particular location will be the reference, and this is a scalar value. The reference to existing variable is created by using the backslash operator. So that is this one. So in the string context we use the backslash often to escape the special characters. but in variable context, when we use the backslash, we actually create a reference to that particular variable or calling its address of that variable. And then reference to literal structures can be created. So if you want to create a reference to a list, we can create by enclosing the list in a square bracket. This is what we are doing it basically by when we write a array. So here a dollar array $A is 1 2 3 4 means when we use the $A, that refers to this whole list, which is 1 2 3 4, and then we use the curly braces essentially like to denote the hash array. Again, we saw that this is how we create the hash array. Essentially what we are saying is like okay, this is the hash and we create a reference for it by enclosing within the curly braces. Again, a lot of these concepts essentially all revolves around essentially like there is one way of understanding, and but this is the next way to understand the same thing slightly differently. So the assignment is to a scalar variable since the literal value is a reference. So here we don't use any of those percentage %h notation or at a. These are all now scalar values. So are these the same? Like are at a equal to $A and percentage %h equal to $H? What do you think? Are they equal? Are they the same? And the answer is not, because now these are scalar variables. So what do they actually contain? This is something that you can actually like do this experiment. Do these assignments and print $A and $H. And let's talk about that in the next class as to next lecture as to what we will see if you do this simple print. But it will be interesting to see like what we get. So for a scalar value itself, for a scalar variable, we know that actually like we can refer to that one by using the backslash. What I mean is here, if this is scalar like a $X, then you can say that basically like $ref equal to backslash $X. So now what is $ref, $A and $H? Or if we have these as our variables, how do we get back to these arrays and hashes and the scalar variables? This one back. So this process basically by which we can convert a reference back to the variable, the original variable, that's known as the dereferencing. Okay, so to access a value pointed by a reference, the programmer must explicitly dereference the reference. So if we are given only the reference, we can dereference by using $2 signs. So a $B in this case is same as $A, because $B is actually backslash $A. I don't know whether it makes sense, but this is the way to understand that. So here in order to reference an array, the arrow sign can be used between the reference and the index. to indicate a dereference. So we can, one thing that we can do is like, I mean, when the $R is at list, then $R will bring back the list, and then if you say like number 3, then that is the index 3 of the list. We can also simply use a $R and then arrow 3 in square brackets, and this is the same as this. But if you just say like $R 3, this is not the same as any of this or even this. The reason is $R square brackets 3 is actually the third element, or actually in this case it's the fourth element of another array named at R, and that's completely related from this one, which is actually the at list. So see the difference, actually here it's at R and here it's at list. So since these two are different, essentially, like, I mean, this is not the same as this. So don't use this for this. If you want to use the list's third element with the reference, then use this or this. And if you want to refer the third element or the fourth element, index 3 of array R, then use this. So I think these are some of the powerful concepts in the Perl language. In Perl language, essentially, like, I mean, that you want to work more with in order to understand this. The concepts are fairly simple, but they are very powerful, and pretty much 90% of the programs themselves use these concepts extensively. And I just wanted to make sure that you can get all these things. Number one thing is we introduced this hash array as a new concept of an array. The key difference between a hash array and a regular array is hash array is an unordered set of key value pairs. So these key value pairs can have any association or can have some relationship, or it can completely be different. And the Perl treats either case as the same. Basically, like, I mean, it's as if, like, I mean, there is no association between any of the keys or any of the values. So the only association that it knows about is the association between a particular key and a particular value. All the others are completely, all the other bits are completely off. And then we denote the hash variable with the percentage basically in the front. We can initialize a hash array using just a simple notation. We can also like make it empty by using undef or just the parenthesis without any key value pairs inside. We can access by the key essentially. So here we use a scalar hash with a particular key value in the curly braces in order to access that. So this is different from other way like the other things that we will learn. We learned later on, which I will also recap on that front. In order to add an element, it's very so initially, like, let's do a modification. Is basically we just modify the we just put a new value for a given key, and then that just modifies the value. So essentially it just replaces that particular value with the new value. And then if you want to actually add, it's again very simple, basically like add with the new key and then with the value, and then the value just that particular key value. And we always use the exists function to find if a particular key value pair exists in the hash array. We cannot just do if that particular key value pair or hash of the key to see whether that one particularly exists, because if the element's value is 0, that particular logical test will return a false value. So the exist function is the surest way to ensure that that particular key value array. Then we can delete a particular key value pair by using the delete function, and to use the delete function we have to specify the hash and the particular key. And please also note that we need to specify the parenthesis here, whereas for exists we don't need to do that. And then we also saw this difference between the scalar, the array, and the hash. Essentially, like scalar could be a number or a string. The string is enclosed within the double quotes or a single quote. Either one is legal syntax. And we also know that actually in the single quote only like some backslash, and there's only one other specific character that will be getting evaluated. All the others are ignored. Whereas in a string that is enclosed within double quotes, even it can interpolate variables within that string, and then it can return the values. So so that those things we already saw this the differences and how we can do all these things. Then the other data structure that we learned was array. The array data structure has starts with the at sign or an ampersand sign, and then the first element is always or the first element is always array 0. So it's the index of 0, then 0, and then the index just progressively goes up. Whereas in hash actually there is nothing visible, it's just a hash with a key is what is denoted in that. We saw some examples. This is the phone book. We also saw the example to how to denote points on a plane, essentially with x1, y1. How do we denote it as hash arrays and how to operate on them. This is like critical. This is key when you actually do like VLSI applications like placement or routing, and we want to denote from one point to another point, and just using Perl to write certain routines. This is very useful. Then we also saw how to access the hash array, access various elements. So if you want to just access all the keys, we just use the keys function. You can also do like a sort on the keys, essentially. Like, so the sort function is also like useful. Then you also saw like the values function, essentially like values function gives all the values of the array here, essentially like we saw these things. Then we actually saw like how the program is being written. So the program has like two parts. One is where we populate the hash function, and then the other one is where we get the name and display what the phone number is actually. One way is essentially like we can combine these two sections into one, where it asks for name, and if the name exists it returns the value. If the name does not exist it asks for the phone number and then populates the array, and then progressively it can go build the entire array, and that's what is shown here. And actually like this could be a good exercise for trying to create a phone book where it not only just gives you the number, but if it is not present in its database it adds that, and then finally it gives you all the entries of the phone book. And then we also studied about the predefined hashes essentially, and then how to set them. Then the two main things that we talked about was referencing a scalar and also dereferencing a scalar. The referencing a scalar value is to reference its address in the memory. So the way to do it is by using the backslash operator. For the lists we simply use the square brackets, and then for a hash we simply use a curly braces to create a reference, and all these references we noted were created as scalars and not as those arrays or the hashes themselves. So these are all like no-nos that we saw. Only like the dollar is allowed. And the other one is, now that once we gotten the references to these variables, how do we dereference them or get back the original array or original lists or original hash functions? How do we get back to that? And for that we can use the extra dollar sign. Essentially it's like so $B, and then for an array actually we use the dash and then the greater than sign, which actually is an arrow sign. Basically this arrow sign is made out of dash and then greater than sign. And then we saw basically like if we have a list and then if $R is assigned to that list, essentially like, or it's the reference to that list, $R3 is one way to access the fourth element of the array, and the other way is the $R and then the arrow to the element 3 to access the element. But if we do just R3, that's incorrect because that's not the same as the previous two, and $R3 is typically the fourth element of the array, and so that pretty much concludes this lecture. We will take it up in the next class from this point, and meanwhile please try to do the small exercise that I have assigned to you, and also think about how do we access based on just the keys, and how do we access the hashes based on the values, and how do we reverse the keys and the values. So I guess thank you very much for attending this lecture. We will see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.